Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome back to the Graphic Thoughts Podcast. I am your host, Dr. Panel, and today's episode is, I know I say this all the time, but probably my most anticipated episode. This is one of my favorite fucking stories and one of my favorite episode concepts that I thought of before I even started the podcast. I am so goddamn excited for this. This episode is A Death in the Family, which is obviously the death of Jason Todd, the second Robin. But we are going to be not just talking about that story arc in general with Jason Todd dying, but we're going to be talking about his original debut, the change in his debut after Crisis. We're going to be talking about his resurrection and afterwards. Basically just a deep dive on the entire character of Jason Todd as a whole in the original continuity. But it's going to be a pretty long episode, I'd say, if not an hour, almost an hour. So strap in for that. I can't wait to get started. I want to thank everybody for the listens and the follows for the last couple episodes. They've been doing really good, so I'm very thankful for that. Like I was saying in the last, I think it was either the last episode or the episode before that, we're going to stick on this schedule of Monday to end Friday uploads, 2 episodes a week. Monday episodes are going to be comic books, and Friday episodes are going to be manga. Gonna kind of keep it on that schedule. Obviously, if there's a story, eventually I'm going to be going back to a lot of the Absolute series that just came out. When I do like Absolute Wonder Woman, I don't think I'm going to be able to fit all the issues of that into one episode, so that'll probably be broken up into 2, and that'll probably be like a Monday and Friday thing. And for example, when I do Full Metal for manga, that's my favorite manga and one of the coolest stories in my opinion, so I want to probably do the same thing for that. Do like the first 3 books, then the second 3 books, Monday and then a Monday and a Friday. But that's what this whole thing's probably going to stay as for the foreseeable future. Going to try to stay on this schedule. We're officially up on YouTube. I think we have episodes 4 through 8 would be the one that just came out on Friday. I believe that came up on Saturday on YouTube. It's probably going to stick to being similar to that for all the episodes going up forward. It'll probably be posted on YouTube either the next day or the day after that. The day after they originally get posted on Spotify. Obviously, for the people who would prefer to listen on YouTube or just don't really use Spotify, it's another way for them to be able to listen to. Eventually, we're going to be on Apple Podcasts. I don't know what the app is specifically called, but I know Apple has their own podcast service, so I'll probably be getting the episodes up on there as soon as I can also. And basically any other podcasting service that we can, just so we can get as many people that want to listen to it to be able to listen to it as possible. Let's get right into this story because I probably never not been more excited for an episode than I am right now. Originally, I was trying to decide between doing this and then doing the original Flashpoint, the one where Barry vanishes at the end. That's probably one of my favorite Flash story, even more than the second, the 2011, I think it was, Flashpoint. But then I got thinking about this story, and I was like, yeah, we might as well just do this one. Let me know if this is a thing you guys are going to be interested in. But I was thinking also about doing the Clone Saga for Spider-Man. I know that's a really, really long saga, so that might be a couple episodes, but it's also just not one of my favorite stories, but I do think it's an interesting story and interesting, like, behind the scenes. So, if you guys did want to hear that and get a couple episodes about that, I'd like to know because that is a really big story to jump into in the first place. And obviously, since I'm not the biggest fan of that story in general, I don't necessarily care whether we do jump into it or don't anytime soon. So, and then also this story got me thinking when I was getting my notes and everything together for this episode. It got me thinking of The Death of Superman, which is another, it was before this, probably the biggest, like the first big controversial event to happen in comic books to kind of get people to read and like talk about it. This is probably the next big one following that. Or not this one. I'm sorry. Nightfall was probably the next big one following that. This was a bit down the line. So, well, this happened before Nightfall. I guess it's one of those things. This isn't as big as like Superman dying or Batman dying, but obviously this was a pretty big thing. The death of Jason Todd. I mean, his introduction happened obviously before Nightfall, and his death happened before Nightfall. But let's get right into it. I've been yapping enough. We're to start off with his pre-crisis introduction, his debut into the Batman mythos, and then just the DC universe as a whole. Alrighty, so Jason Todd's first appearance is after. Well, actually, before I get into that, now that I'm thinking about it, I wanted to get into why Jason is no longer Robin and why there was a spot for that needed to be filled in the first place. So basically, the reason, it wasn't like a specific one singular reason why Dick decided to leave, really, but it was kind of a combination of stuff. But mainly he was growing up, obviously, by the early 1980s when he ended up leaving. Dick wasn't really a kid anymore, obviously. He started out pretty young, like 13, 14. He was in college. He was leading the Teen Titans team by this point, the original continuity of the Teen Titans. He became very much independent. And obviously he didn't want to be Batman's sidekick forever. Has been about 4 or 5 years now as in the continuity as he was being Batman's sidekick and was behind Batman. If you're actually reading the Batman books about this time period when he is starting to get ready to get out of there, you can definitely tell that Batman still treats him like he's young and still treats him like he's a sidekick, doesn't treat him like the grown man or the adult leading this very successful older team. So that's a very big problem between the two of them in general. And this leads to a lot of tension just being built between them in the first place. In the early versions of the story, pre-Crisis, Crisis changed a lot of fucking shit. So you're going to hear that term a lot, especially throughout the story, pre-Crisis. But in the pre-Crisis, the original versions of this telling of the story, Batman becomes colder and more obsessed with crime. He starts to push Dick away, doesn't communicate very well, and he starts to treat him like an asset, or treats him like an asset, not a partner. Eventually, Bruce basically tells him he doesn't need him anymore. That obviously hurts Dick pretty badly. He looks at Bruce as a father figure. This wasn't just like a career change or like, okay, I'm going to go do something else now. It felt like a rejection from his father again. Obviously, there was earlier stories where he didn't treat Dick very well, so it was kind of similar. Also, in the early 1980s, writer Marv Wolfman wanted Dick to grow beyond Robin in the Teen Titans. This is a little bit behind the scenes, obviously, but he believed that Robin was a kid identity. Dick needed something more adult, more suiting to the role that he's now going to play, especially as this leader of the Teen Titans. And this is when, in Tales of the Titans 44, Dick officially becomes Nightwing. This is the first time he gets the mantle. Obviously, it's the blue and yellow one. It's actually my favorite Nightwing suit, but the name Nightwing actually comes, funny enough, from a Kryptonian legend told to him by Superman. I always thought this was really cool because obviously Superman and Batman have had this friendship, not hatred, but this weird relationship forever. So the fact that Batman's first son, for lack of a better term, took this big thing from Superman rather than Batman was just really interesting to me. Every time when I first learned about it, and then since I've heard about it. But this name and then just his new identity in general very much symbolizes stepping out of Batman's shadow, choosing his own identity, becoming his own kind of hero. And it's not because he stopped caring about Bruce or stopped wanting to be in Bruce's life. He just stopped being Robin. He stopped wanting to be behind Bruce, standing in the background. I also think an important thing to remember when you think about him leaving, that him leaving was very much about growth and not like a rebellion kind of thing. Dick realized that if he stays there forever, he's going to become like Bruce. Dick was very much more of representative of like hope, optimism, and like light. He was obviously younger, didn't go through as much trauma. He went through trauma, obviously, the way his parents and everything died. All that went down, and then Batman, Bruce, obviously represents trauma, obsession, darkness, He's a very dark and brooding character, so Dick was afraid that if he stayed there too long, because obviously the environment changes people and people change people, so he didn't want to turn out or end up in a direction he didn't want to originally. Going back to Dick Grayson, though, obviously now that Nightwing is left, or going back to Jason Todd, after Dick Grayson left, there's a spot to be filled. Originally, Batman wasn't planning on getting a new person, but eventually it did happen. Pre-Crisis, his first appearance was in Batman 357, 1983. He was created by Gary Conway and Don Newton. The original story was very, very much just a copy and paste from Dick Grayson's origin story. Batman discovers a circus family called the Flying Todds. Dick Grayson, Robin, has already grown up and left to become Nightwing at this point. The Todds are murdered by criminals, very similar to how Dick's parents died. Bruce Wayne adopts Jason. Jason eventually becomes the new Robin. Very cut forward, basically the exact same story as Dick Grayson's introduction. I thought this was very fucking lazy. I'm glad with the post-crisis they ended up changing it and giving him his own little cool backstory. And then how they continued on with that with the rest of the Robins afterwards. When eventually we'll get to Tim Drake, who's my favorite. But very lazy for them to just copy and paste the Dick Grayson story onto Jason here. The key things from this is obviously Jason originally had the same copy and paste story as Dick with the tragedy story. Also interesting to note here that Jason originally had red hair in this story. Later he dyed it black. In most iterations of Dick Grayson, he has black hair, at least now. The fans weren't a big fan of the original introduction of Jason Todd. They thought it lacked personality and originality. He was very just bland and bleak. They weren't very interested in him because of that. DC later rebooted him. Like I was saying earlier, he was rebooted in post-Crisis. When we say Crisis, by the way, we're talking about Crisis on Infinite Earths. Okay, but his new origin and his new introduction was in Batman 408. This was written by Max Allan Collins. This is the Jason Todd that most people know and most people remember. Luckily. It starts with a Batmobile incident. Batman catches a kid stealing the wheels off the Batmobile. That kid is Jason Todd. Instead of being scared, Jason is bold, sarcastic, and fearless. Then he instantly sets him apart from Dick Grayson. Dick was very much a quiet, shy, kind of stoic. In a way similar to Batman in just how not very energetic and outgoing he was, but obviously after he gets over the tragedy a little more and he grows up a little more, becomes a little more outgoing and more open, but he was never like a sarcastic dickhead like Jason was. That they did a really good job the second incarnation of Jason, very much changing his character and keeping him different from Dick Grayson and Nightwing, so people weren't gonna have the same ideas like they did last time, that he's very boring, very bland. They also changed his background, his backstory, if you will. For this one, he lives in Crime Alley, same place as Bruce's parents died. His father is a small-time criminal who disappeared. His mother is either dead or missing, later revealed to be a more complicated and complex story. He survives alone on the streets. Jason is angry, rough, and street smart. He knows what he's doing. It's not necessarily unsafe for him on the streets because he's been there so long and he's been having to survive there for as long as he has. This leads to Bruce's decision. Bruce sees intelligence, athletic ability, rage, potential. He takes Jason in, initially sending him to school, but Jason struggles to adjust. He's not the cheerful circus kid Robin once was. Like I was saying earlier, they did a really, really good job at separating and making the characters between Jason and Dick very much different here. This kind of leads us to when he became Robin. Jason eventually proves himself during a case involving criminals from his past. Bruce decides instead of letting the streets shape him, he will shape him. Jason becomes the second Robin, and that's basically the main origin of him that people really know. Most people don't remember that he originally was just a copy and paste of Dick Grayson. I thought this was a very good it's a good thing to remember because when you really think about it, Jason was going to be involved in crime in some case, some sort of way, some scenario anyway, due to just the way he was brought up and where he lived and how everything was going. So Bruce taking him in was basically, let's make it so it's on the right side of the law rather than the wrong side if it's going to be involved in the law anyway. That was kind of the whole point of it. And I think that's a really interesting or a good thing to remember because obviously if you're gonna go either way, if someone can help you go the better way of the two, it's helpful. So, and just a little more to compare the differences between just the characters and then of Dick Grayson and Jason Todd. Beginning in the introduction of these characters, Dick Grayson's very optimistic. He's obviously an acrobat. He's very obedient, obviously, because having to take orders at such a young age for his job at the circus. And he's very lighthearted, despite, obviously, I was saying he had to get over the tragedy, which he did. His parents were killed in front of him, but he was very much didn't destroy him like someone else it would have. Like some people it would have. He was still very lighthearted and still very just a kid still, despite the tragedy and the horrible things that he had to suffer at such a young age. And then differently, Jason was very angry. He was a street fighter, rebellious, very dark and intense. Obviously, with just the lifestyle that he was living, obviously, you would imagine that he was going through a lot of fucking crazy shit the entire time he was alive. There was never a boring day in Crime Alley, so very different life to come from. Another very interesting thing is that Jason questioned Batman's no-kill rule very, very, very early on. That was one of the first, not necessarily arguments between them, but the first big thing that they disagreed on very, very early. That kind of showed you that Jason could be a much darker character if it were to get to that point, and then obviously later in stories it does get to that point, but I don't necessarily think they had that planned from the beginning. And then why I think this Jason Todd's introduction and then the way his character is special, mainly in the specifically in the post-crisis, is it kind of shows what would happen if Batman were to adopt someone that was more like himself, very dark, very damaged from his past trauma and past events that happened in his life. It also explores, because you'll see it the more you go through Jason Todd early stories, but when he was Robin. But he has so much rage. He is such an angry young man, and this very much explores whether rage can be truly controlled by dealing with it, and then dealing with it in the way Batman deals with his trauma and his rage. This all eventually leads to the big main story of this entire episode, which is, drumroll, Batman 426, which is a death in the family, where fans voted by phone to kill him in the story. I'll be honest, I don't believe that the phone thing was ever actually like a real thing. I do believe people called in. There was a real number that people could call, but I think they truly always planned on killing him. I don't think there was ever a plan to not kill him off. I don't necessarily know or think when they killed him off they thought they were going to bring him back as Red Hood. I do think they thought eventually they'd bring him back, but I absolutely, from the bottom of my heart, think that they planned on killing him from the beginning. But let's jump into the A Death in the Family storyline. It is such a good fucking story, and let's get right through it. So before we get too deep in the story, I did want to just bring up how quickly this happened after his debut. Obviously, his re-debut and then where the story goes from there was in 1987 in Batman 408, and then A Death in the Family is Batman 426. Well, it's from 426 to 429, but it was a little over 20 issues with him in it, and I don't want you to think because it was only 20 issues, it didn't build his character up much, and there wasn't really anything to it. That's not necessarily true. There was a couple decently big stories in the time of him being Batman. We'll go through a couple of them. There's obviously his first time as Robin, which was in Batman 410. Jason officially debuts in the costume. He was straight off the gate, obviously much more aggressive than Dick Grayson was. Already shows a harsher edge in combat. You can feel Bruce watching him more cautiously. This is where readers start noticing he's not the same Robin as Dick Grayson. The next big thing that happened was in Batman 416 was with this actually was with Nightwing. Jason teams up with him. What happens is Dick sees how different Jason is. They clash in personality. Jason feels constantly compared to Dick, whether that's good or bad. He just always feels like he's in some sort of competition with him. This issue very much highlighted Jason's insecurity. Doesn't feel good enough. Doesn't feel like he's the right guy for the spot. It highlights his resentment at living in the shadow of Dick Grayson in general. Obviously, Dick was the first Robin. Every Robin afterward, people are going to compare to Dick Grayson. And then obviously just the emotional pressure of replacing what a lot of people think of as the perfect Robin, which was Dick Grayson. So, and then the last big thing that happened, this happened right before Death in the Family in Batman 424, was the Philippe Garzanas, I don't know if I pronounced that right, incident. Jason confronts a corrupt diplomat's son who assaulted a woman. The villain falls off a building. It's left ambiguous. Did Jason push him or let him fall? I was always led more to believe that he kind of just let him fall. But this is a very huge thing. This is the moment the readers thought he might actually have killed somebody. It's confirmed that Jason has a darker nature than obviously Dick did, or just in general than we originally thought, or even Bruce thought. But there were some things that happened, and there's a good amount of stories in between his introduction and then his death to kind of show you just who the character was and more about mainly the differences between Dick and him in general. I think that was a really big thing that they kind of pushed. But obviously all of that leads us directly into a death in the family. Again, like I said, these are the issues of this book are from Batman 426 to 429. The writer is Jim Starlin. The artist is Jim Aparo. Probably pronounced that wrong. Sorry about that. Like I was saying earlier, this is the story where readers voted to decide if Jason Todd would live or die. They voted for death. It starts in Batman, like I said, issue 426, Batman and Son. Jason discovers that his biological mother may still be alive. He's emotionally unstable from this, obviously. He didn't know where she was or what happened to her for the longest time, and then one day he just finds out she could still be alive. He feels compared to Dick Grayson, like I was saying earlier. Obviously, he feels like he'll never be able to live up to the giant pedestal that this guy is put on. He feels like Bruce doesn't trust him, especially after the incident that just happened in 425. The guy falling off the building. This insecurity and then this jealousy, envy, whatever you want to call it, kind of drives everything that's going to happen in this story in general. Meanwhile, as all of this is taking place, the Joker escapes Arkham again, but this time he's not just causing chaos, he's involved in a bigger scheme. This leads to Jason going rogue. Jason runs off alone to search for his mother. Batman doesn't know where he is. This is important. Jason leaves without backup. Obviously, Batman doesn't know where he is, depending on what goes wrong or what happens or what could go wrong. Jason has no way to make sure he's okay other than himself. And when someone upset and is someone as emotionally unstable at the moment as Jason is, obviously, even in general, that would be a bad idea, but with how fucked up he is right now, that's also just an awful idea because of that. And this does end up being a fatal mistake for Jason, as we'll come to find out. In issue 427, this one's a death in the family. To search for his mother, Jason tracks down 3 possible women in the Middle East who could be his biological mother. Eventually, he narrows it down to one lady named Sheila Haywood. She works in Ethiopia. Jason is overwhelmed and that he finally has family and he finally found the woman that he's been searching for, or at least has been thinking has been missing this entire time. This leads us to the betrayal. Sheila is secretly working with the Joker. She's been embezzling money and the Joker blackmails her. And to save herself, she hands Jason over as a sort of collateral to keep herself safe and to keep herself out of the situation. This leads us into the very, very, very brutal scene. One of the most brutal things that, especially when I was a kid, when the first time I read this story, that I've ever seen, is the Joker savagely beating Jason with the crowbar. Obviously, Jason's still a kid at this time. You see, and because of the short time that we saw him, even not even get to grow up, we still see him as a kid. So this is a very impactful scene and a very crazy that people wanted him to die like this. But it wasn't quick. It wasn't cinematic. It was just brutal. And then the saddest part about this entire thing is that Jason tries to protect his mother even after she betrayed him. This makes it even more tragic. He still chooses love, even though the love is what hurt him and the love is what ended up leading to all this and what caused the pain and the suffering and then the eventual death of him in general. Directly following this is the explosion. The Joker leaves Jason and Sheila tied up in the warehouse, rigged to explode. Batman arrives seconds too late. He pulls Jason's body from the rubble. Jason is dead. This directly leads us into the aftermath. In issue 428, Batman is shattered. And when I say Batman is shattered, you gotta remember, especially if you're someone who were reading this through the years and through the stories in order and getting to actually be attached to these characters. This was a very, very monumental thing that happened in Batman's life. Especially me, as someone who started reading Batman after this, in the my original time reading Batman was the Batman that was taking place with the Tim Drake run in the Teen Titans, and he was pretty fucked up from this then. In those runs, you would see it then. So he was very hesitant on even letting Tim Drake join him after this. So when I say he was shattered, he was absolutely fucking destroyed for the death of what he saw to be his second son. He carries Jason's body. There's no dramatic speech, no revenge killing, just silence. The Joker, meanwhile, becomes an Iranian diplomat. He gains diplomatic immunity. Really, I'm not making that shit up. That's legitimately happened. So Batman cannot legally touch him. This is, if not the greatest failure, one of Bruce's greatest failures. Issue 429, Political Chaos. The Joker attempts to gas the United Nations. Batman stops him, but he does not kill him. This is critical even after the death of Jason Todd. Batman keeps his code and does not kill. Jason's arc in this story is obviously very fucking emotional. He wanted belonging. He sought family. He made emotional decisions, trusted the wrong people, died trying to save his family. Jason's arc is super fucking tragic, and it's a very easy one to understand and get attached to, and then just for him to end up going out. And then Bruce's arc is obviously pretty tragic itself. He realizes he pushed Jason too hard, feels responsible, questions whether he should have allowed Jason to be Robin in the first place, whether or not he should have stopped after Dick Grayson. Obviously, like I was saying earlier, this infamously was voted via phone call in a number service. DC set up 2 phone numbers, one set to let Jason live, one to kill him. The vote was extremely close. Death won by only 72 votes. This changed Batman forever. This story is very important for a lot of different reasons. One is obviously it ended the lighthearted, easygoing Robin era. He literally just died. This kid just died. This made Batman a lot darker. Going forward, this proved sidekicks weren't safe. It could literally, anybody could die. It cemented Joker as very much an irredeemable, evil villain that, no matter the story afterwards, you can't really come back from this. And for years, Jason stayed dead for many, many, many years until Under the Red Hood is when he finally did return. But that's what we'll jump right into now, is Under the Red Hood and what led us to that. Obviously, like I was just saying, Jason stayed dead for a very long time, but after all of that is when we got to Under the Red Hood and Jason's resurrection and his vendetta and the story arc that leads to and everything after that. So like I was saying, that leads us directly into Under the Red Hood. I did want to kind of talk about just the in-between time, because I don't want you to think that it was just he died and he came back and it was nothing. He was dead for 15 years in real time. And the shadow of death, I like to call it, between the period of like the late 1980s and then the early 2000s is the time period between this. And obviously it's 15 real years, and there's a lot of growing and arcs and stuff that happens in between then, and that happens to show just how much this actually affected Batman and then the other characters and just the world in general. So, if this period establishes Jason's Robin costume remains in the memorial case in the Batcave. Obviously, that's like an iconic scene, is seeing that. They hinted at it, and I think it was Batman vs. Superman in the DC universe. I hated that fucking movie. That was a cool scene. I'm pretty sure it was that movie. But Batman becomes noticeably darker and more emotionally closed off after this. Like I was saying earlier, he was very, very, very against Tim Drake becoming the next Robin. He very much had to earn it and prove that he could be it. But if you read Batman comics prior to A Death in the Family and then after, it is very notice his suit gets darker. Every single thing gets darker. It is very, very noticeably how affected he is from Jason Todd's death. Bruce blames himself. Obviously, like I was just saying, he thought he was pushing him too hard, and he ended up leading to the death of his son, basically. The Joker continues to live. This is the most controversial thing, at least for me. I've always been a firm believer that Batman shouldn't kill. That's just a thing he shouldn't do. It's huge for his character and big for... Same with Superman, just very important for their characters that they don't. It's a big line they shouldn't cross. But if there's ever a time, the Joker should have died for this. Because I think there's a point where someone is too dangerous to leave alive. And the Joker's showing here that he literally will not... There is not a line he would not cross. Is just showing that he is legitimately too dangerous to leave alive. It is not a possibility or a thing that is okay. But he does. It leads to a lot of more fucking tragedy. But Jason becomes Batman's greatest failure. Like I was saying earlier, obviously. What could be a bigger failure than leading your son to death, basically? This is an emotional scar that is crucial for what comes later, obviously with Under the Red Hood. And this all leads us to a new Robin. Tim eventually convinces Bruce. First off, before I even get to that actually, Tim Drake, man. The best Robin, in my opinion. The only one that makes sense for the heir of the throne to Batman's mantle. Think about it. Dick Grayson never wanted to be the next Batman. He always wanted to get out of that shadow when he could. Jason Todd's died for 15 years. And fuck Damian Wayne. So, Tim Drake is the only one that's ever made sense to fit that mantle. Tim Drake's the best Robin. Tim Drake's the best detective. He was the one that originally had the bow staff, and then a lot of iterations of other characters now just decide to give him a bow staff instead. Fucking bullshit. That is Tim's thing. He was also the most relatable character. I think it was a very relatable thing to like Spider-Man at this similar time period in the comic books. Just being able to relate to that teenage character while you're reading it as a teenager was always cool. I read a lot of the Tim Drake. Tim Drake also, funny enough, best Robin. It's the first Robin to get a solo series. It was 3 different series. I think the first one had like 3 books in it. The second one had like 3 or 4 books in it. Maybe 6. And both of them, I'm not sure. I don't remember. And then the third one had over 100. Plus, he led incarnation of the Teen Titans series. And in my opinion, it was the first one I read, so I'm a little biased. But the best incarnation of the Teen Titans series. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Just went on a rant about Tim Drake. I love Tim Drake. I cannot make that clear enough. But Tim eventually convinces Bruce that the Batman needs a Robin. This matters obviously because after the events of A Death in the Family, it was very, very hard to convince him to do that and to accept another sidekick, if you will. Tim is very calm and intelligent. He is everything Jason wasn't. It indirectly highlights Jason's instability. Jason's legacy becomes the Robin who wasn't ready. This contrast builds future tension between Jason and Tim, and then obviously Jason and Bruce. But this directly leads us to the actual big event that led to Under the Red Hood. The reality-shattering event, Infinity Crisis. A really good book, probably my best or my favorite out of all those. I didn't like Crisis on Infinite Earths or Infinite Worlds, whatever it was. It's just really boring, man. It's too long. But Infinity Crisis was good. But during Infinity Crisis, Superboy Prime punches reality. You know, like you do. Some of these things are just really fucking funny when you read them. Superboy punches reality. Because that's just a thing someone should be able to do. Superboy Prime punches reality. The multiverse fractures, timeline alternations ripple outward. One of those changes, Jason Todd is resurrected in his coffin. He crawls out of his grave, confused and damaged, but he's not fully restored mentally. Obviously, like how would you be? Jason is eventually found and trained by Talia al Ghul. I'm not going to be able to say the next name, but she places him in the Lazarus pit used by Raj al Ghul. I'm not good with that name. The Lazarus pit. The pit restores his body, amplifies his rage, destabilizes his mind. The Lazarus pit has been used in a lot of stories prior to this, so it's introduced. It's not just a new thing that is shown here. This isn't the first introduction of it. I'll be honest with you, I did not look up and put in my notes prior to talking about it now when the first introduction of it was, but you're just going to have to take my word for it on this one. Jason now knows, after going through that he died. Batman didn't avenge him. The Joker is still alive. There's a new Robin. This is psychological breaking point. Fuck it, I fucked it up. Let me go. This is a psychological breaking point for Jason. He basically snaps after this. He is very, very, very just fucked up. Jason's anger becomes very ideological. He believes that Batman let the Joker live, which is his biggest issue. His biggest issue isn't even necessarily that the Joker is still alive, it's that he let him live. He didn't even try to kill him, try to avenge him. He doesn't just hate the Joker, he's furious at Bruce. In Jason's mind, killing the Joker would have honored him. Batman choosing his code over his son is betrayal, which I agree with. I know it's a controversial thing, but I, 1000% think Batman should have killed Joker for this. He should have fucking curb stomped him. And then this belief drives everything under the Red Hood. Alright, so jumping right into the Under the Red Hood story, it is issues of Batman 635 to 641, then there's a couple issue break, and then it's 645 to 650. The writers, Jude Winnick. The main villains are obviously Red Hood, Black Mask, and then the Joker. And then it's important to remember going into it that this isn't just a Jason comes back story. It's very much a moral trial for Batman. Obviously, he's going to be forced to face the consequences of the choices he made, specifically leaving Joker alive and letting everything that happened with him afterwards happen with him. And then in Jason's eyes, obviously not avenging him. Let's jump right into issue through 635, which is the start of it. It's called The Lost Days Begin. A mysterious new crime lord called Red Hood hijacks Black Mask shipment, and the way he does it and the way he goes about it and the signatures that he leaves, it proves he's very tactical. He knows Batman's patterns. He knows Gotham's underworld structure. Batman immediately senses that this isn't random. It's in some way a message being sent, if not to him, to Gotham entirely. Unlike Joker, Jason's attacks aren't chaotic. They're very strategic. He's looking for revenge, and he believes the simplest way to get Batman to come after him and get his attention is by attacking Bruce's city to get as much attention looking his way as possible. This leads us into issue 636. By this point, it happens really quickly. It kind of shows how aware of everything Red Hood is of what's going on in the city prior to starting all of his stuff. How quickly he's able to do everything he's trying to do, take over the underworld and take over crime in general in Gotham. But he forces gangs under one rule. He kills drug dealers. He targets traffickers. He establishes order through fear. Basically, overnight, he becomes the leader of the entire crime world in Gotham, which is no small feat. Obviously, just think about all of the rogues gallery of Batman in Gotham, and then think about all the crime that's underneath that has to be happening in Gotham. He literally takes over all of it, basically. Batman starts to realize that the criminal understands his methods. He has to, or he wouldn't have been able to use those methods basically to take down the entirety of Gotham's crime and take it over. And then the kind of deeper meaning with that in general is Jason's kind of doing what he was saying and what he's always believed Batman should be doing in the first place, which is controlling crime through permanent solutions. He's killed a bunch of people, and then also the other ones that he can't just kill, he is using to do his bidding rather than let them just do whatever they please and start and create more crime in the city. So before we get too farther into it, I do want to just say that I think it's this entire book, but in the beginning of the book here, it does a really, really good job at showing the differences between the Red Hood character and Batman. There's the way they view things, those differences, and then just the way they act and the way they go about the business they go about is very different. Obviously, Batman doesn't kill. Red Hood has already killed multiple people, and he has brutalized multiple people. Batman tries to send him to jail. He doesn't participate in crime really, other than the vigilanteism. Red Hood's the complete opposite. He does compete. He's competed in a lot of crimes so far. So they did a really good job just from the beginning at making sure that they're doing what they should be doing, everybody, and that the characters aren't just the same characters, specifically similar to how they did it with Jason in the original incarnation of his character. Shortly after this, in issue 636, or 637 rather, Batman and Red Hood for the first time clash physically. Red Hood escapes. Bruce begins suspecting the impossible Jason Todd, but Bruce refuses to believe it. Obviously, he literally held his dead body in his arms. He buried him. He was involved with all that. He grieved him, so he's not going to... It's not going to be an easy thing to convince him that he could possibly be back to life, nor would he want to accept it in the first place, given that he is his biggest mistake. He is his biggest loss, his biggest tragedy. So, because of Jason's alive, obviously, then Bruce failed twice. He failed to save him, he failed to avenge him, he failed to do everything. Issue 638, the reveal builds. Red Hood manipulates gang wars between Black Mask's organization and then other criminal factions. Jason is dismantling Gotham's crime ecosystem to reshape it. This isn't random vengeance, it's systematic. A systematic takeover. He's trying to rebuild it in the way that he believes it should be, in the way he sees everything as. So it's very much not just like the Joker, for example, chaotic and doing whatever he can to just piss off Batman and then do whatever his sick little mind sees as a good plan. It's very strategic, and it's very broken down each part by part to make sure that everything goes according to Jason's plan. So they do a very, very good job of showing just how dangerous and then how intelligent Jason is with how he's doing all of this. Shortly after this, it's where this leads us to the identity reveal. Red Hood unmasks. It is Jason. No fake out, no clone twist. Bruce is stunned. Emotionally, Bruce doesn't celebrate. He feels very guilty. He's obviously at a loss for words. He doesn't know what's going on. Jason is obviously, he's alive. He's very angry and he's very broken. Obviously going through the stuff with the Joker and then being brought back to life and believing that Batman didn't even care, basically. Not only did he not kill the Joker, but he didn't get he got a new Robin. He didn't really do anything to change his behavior other than becoming darker, but Jason wouldn't have known that. So he's very, very hurt by everything that has happened. This leads us directly into 640 and 641, the big escalation of the story. Jason kidnaps the Joker. This is a key turning point. He brings the Joker to Bruce and forces the question, why is he still alive? He killed your son. Why is he still alive? Why was he able to continue to be able to do everything that he's doing and has done since I died 15 years ago? Why is this problem still a problem? This is when Jason gives Batman a choice. Kill Joker, or Jason kills him, or Bruce kills Jason. Bruce refuses. Obviously, he doesn't want to kill the Joker. He doesn't want Jason to kill the Joker, and obviously he doesn't want to kill Jason. He just, in his eyes at least, he just got him back. And Jason screams, and this is a direct quote, "I'm not talking about killing Penguin or Scarecrow. I'm talking about him. Just him." Jason doesn't want Bruce to become a murderer. He wants to prove that he mattered. I think this is one of the saddest imagery in comic book history. Jason, you can really see, is just a hurt boy. He's an adult now and he's grown up, but he's really just a hurt, scared, damaged kid that went through all of this so much younger than anybody ever should have. But to Jason, if the Joker lives, Jason meant nothing. Everything that happened afterwards, it all meant nothing because the Joker is still alive and he's still able to do everything he's doing. Bruce responds, "If I allow myself to go there, I'll never come back." Obviously, this is the fundamental clash that Batman has always had and has always stated that if he was ever to cross that line, he wouldn't be able to come back. And in every single case other than this, I've always thought it was fair, but I truly don't think that Joker should be allowed to live after what he did in this book. Not even just because he killed Jason in like a revenge thing, but simply because he showed that he is too dangerous to leave alive. And I think that's the most important part. It's not even that he killed your son, it's that him killing your son showing... It shows that he's willing to do legitimately anything. But obviously this is a big fundamental clash between Jason and Bruce. Jason believes that justice requires killing the Joker. Bruce believes that if he kills once, it destroys the entire mission that he has put himself on and put himself to. Jason believes that his death demands consequences. Obviously the person who did it should be held responsible and shouldn't be able to do what he's doing, obviously. Obviously, Bruce believes that his code needs to hold. He can't cross his own lines that he's put in place. Jason believes that he chose Joker over him, and Batman still just continues to push that he can't cross the line. Jason tries to force Bruce to shoot him. Bruce throws a battery instead. An explosion separates them. Jason disappears. Obviously, Batman would never have killed Jason, and he would never have killed the Joker. This was always something that was, I think we knew going in and we knew reading through it, but the impact just from how they were able to write the character of Jason and how hurt he is just as a person was so fucking good, man. It is so fucking good. It is truly one of the best stories that I've ever read in my entire life. A couple things you definitely want to just kind of think about going out of this story is this is very much a story about failure. Bruce failed to heal Jason's trauma, to protect him, to emotionally connect with him. And then Jason becomes the son Bruce couldn't save. Like, in many ways. He couldn't save him the original time, and then when he came to this, he wasn't able to really save him this time. Jason also very much represents Batman's dark reflection. Jason is Batman without restraint. He's Batman without more moral breaks. He's Batman shaped purely by rage. He doesn't have these lines and guidelines that he set for himself to make sure he doesn't cross or go over something that he would never want to do. He's very much Bruce's philosophy taken to its logical extreme. Like Bruce always says, once he crosses that line, he can never go back. It's very, very much, if he ever crosses that line, he'd become what Jason had become. And then obviously the Joker's role is super important in this book. The Joker barely matters physically in this story. He's not very much there, but he very much matters symbolically. He is the unresolved trauma, the wound Bruce refuses to cauterize and finally get rid of and let heal. The Joker should be dead, but he's alive in this story. And he's very much the proof that Batman's system doesn't fully work. Putting him in jail and trying to rehabilitate him, they can't all be rehabilitated, and the Joker is very much proof that you can't be rehabilitated. And it's good to keep in mind just why the Joker, or why Batman doesn't kill the Joker. Obviously, it's a very much moral thing, but it's really much not about mercy. It's about control. Bruce believes if he kills once, even for Jason, he becomes ruled by emotion. Jason believes that if you don't kill him, you're ruled by fear. The ideological divide can't be bridged. They can't come to an agreement or a crossing. And I gotta admit, I agree with Jason there. I've always thought that Batman should have killed Joker in this story. But the final emotional and just outcomes in general of this story is that Jason doesn't defeat Bruce. Not that he was necessarily going in there to do that in the first place, but he doesn't. Bruce doesn't redeem Jason. they don't reconcile, remain father and son divided by one moral line, and one person still being alive, basically. And then for a minute, I just wanted to get into why this story is so important. Obviously, it permanently changed Jason's character. It redefined resurrection, really, like how it could go. And it doesn't just, they don't always just come back as the same character or the same thing that they were doing before. A lot of the times, like this, and then like in Darkest Day, or whatever, maybe it was Brightest. No, it was Darkest Day. Where all the lanterns of the dead superheroes came back, and when they ended up defeating that guy and they came back and were alive again, it was very traumatizing for him. I think that was in Brightest Night, or Darkest Day, but yeah, Brightest Night. And then it redefined Batman's code. It obviously showed just how fucking strong and set to his code he is. It turned Jason into one of DC's, if not one of the most complex anti-heroes that they have. It made the Joker and Batman conflict much more deep. Jason very much isn't just a resurrected sidekick. He's a Batman living consequence. He is something Batman's always going to have to look at and deal with for the rest of his lifetime, at least if Jason survives that long. And then for a little bit, I also just wanted to, because this one also did have a animated movie, not tie-in, but movie that was made directly off of it. So I just wanted to talk a little bit about the differences of that. The movie is also the comic called Under the Red Hood. It came out in 2010. It's an animated film. It adapts the comic storyline, but it makes major structural and emotional changes throughout the story to kind of add and or take away certain things. Some are simplifications and then some are improvements in some people's eyes. The resurrection explanation in the comics, obviously Jason returns because of reality being altered during Infinity Crisis, Superboy Prime punching reality, and then Talia al Ghul using the Lazarus Pit. In the movie, obviously there is no Superboy Prime. Jason is recovered by Talia, but put directly into the Lazarus Pit, returns unstable. Cleaner, easier to follow, and emotionally focused. I still like it better because I've always been a big fan of when the books and the like events and stuff actually impact the stories and are actually connected. Personally, I like it better in the comics where it's connected to Infinity Crisis. And then two, Black Mask's role is very much reduced in the movie. In the comics, Black Mask is a major crime boss. There's a heavy gang politics. Red Hood manipulates multiple factions. In the movie, Black Mask is simplified. Crime war complexity is toned down very much. It's not as much of a big issue in the movie as it is in the book. The focus shifts almost entirely to just Jason versus Bruce. There isn't very much leading up to it or very much of anything else before that. The film prioritizes very much the emotional conflict of the book rather than the crime world, politics and stuff of that part of the book. And then in the movie, Joker's role is definitely expanded a bit. In the comics, Joker is important symbolically, but he's not heavily featured throughout the book itself. In the movie, however, Joker has much more screen presence. His scenes are sharper and more personal. His relationship with Jason feels more central. And he just in all seems like a much more important part of the book, or of the movie rather, than he did in the book. Film very much leads into the emotional triangle between Bruce, Jason, and the Joker. And then for 4, the final confrontation is very much just tighter. I'll explain. In the comics, Jason forces Batman to choose. Bruce refuses. A battering to the throat, explosion. Jason disappears ambiguously. It's dramatic but messy. In the movie, the confrontation is more direct and brutal. Jason says, "I'm not asking you to kill Penguin or Scarecrow, just him." Bruce responds emotionally but firmly. When Jason realizes Bruce won't kill Joker, he sets off the explosion himself. Bruce chooses to save the Joker instead of chasing Jason. The visual choice hurts more in the film. It's clearer, it's sharper, it's devastating. To be honest, I don't really agree with that. That's just kind of what most people think and most people agree with. I still think it was better done in the comics, and then the emotional tone's a little bit different. In the comic, it's much more sprawling, and it goes from here to there to there to there. It's more political with more of a moral ideology kind of thing. And then larger DC Universe implications are involved in the comic. Obviously, with movies like this, they don't generally have a whole bunch of movies that also are involved or connected, so this doesn't happen as often in the movies. In the movie, it's much more focused, intimate, centered entirely on grief and ideology rather than any of the other stuff. No to universe actions, no universe tie-ins really. The movie very much strips it down, and obviously it was only 90 minutes, I think, too, so they had to fit it in less time. But the movie strips the story down into base mainly just its emotional skeleton. It breaks out all the side things and keeps everything just down to the main story beats and emotional arcs of the book. And then Jason's characterization is a little bit different from the comics to the book, or the comics to the movie. In the comics, Jason is colder, he's more methodical, he's more crime lord strategic. And in the movie, Jason is more openly hurt, he's more emotionally raw, more visibly wounded. There is no sort of crime lord kind of thing. The animated version leans into the tragedy a lot more than the story of the resurrection itself. Which version is better? Many fans argue the movie is. They argue that it's more emotionally powerful. They argue that better paced, less convoluted, cleaner thematically. The comic is, to some people, they think it's on a bigger scope, more layered politically, more connected to the DC continuity. I agree with the comic being better. I've always thought the comic was a bit better than the movie. But I do think it's important to just kind of remember the differences with all of that. After the events, because obviously it's all connected to other stories and stuff. After the events of Under the Red Hood, the first time we see Jason is in like 2006, 2010. After the explosion, Jason resurfaces darker and more unhinged than ever. He appears in Nightwing, Brothers in Blood, and then Battle of the Cowl. What does he do? He fights Nightwing brutally, becomes more violent. At one point, he tries to take over as Batman after Bruce is presumed dead. Uses guns and lethal force openly. He is still killing people. He is still much farther beyond that point than you could possibly imagine. Battle of the Cowl, identity crisis. Bruce is presumed to be dead. Gotham is chaotic. Jason briefly wears a modified Batman suit, but here's the key: he's a brutal Batman. Very similar to John Paul in Nightfall when he wore the cowl. In some ways, not all. Jason uses guns, he kills criminals, he imposes fear without restraint. This proves something important. Jason doesn't want to replace Bruce, he wants to prove Bruce wrong. Dick Grayson eventually defeats him. Jason spirals again. In 2011, there was a bit of a reboot, a new direction for the character. He was an anti-hero rather than a villain directly. DC's New 52 reboot, Red Hood and the Outlaws. He teams up with Arsenal, which is Speedy. It's Green Arrow's old sidekick. He teams up with Arsenal and Starfire. The major changes from the original to the New 52 run is he's more emotionally stable, still lethal, but he's less revenge-driven, more independent from Batman. He becomes a globe-trotting anti-hero, not fully redeemed, but not a villain. And then into the Rebirth era. Honestly, this episode is probably just going to be a deep dive on Jason Todd, which I guess afterwards you can let me know if you'll want more things like this, since we talked about, it was originally just going to be into the Under the Red Hood, but we talked about so much more than just Under the Red Hood, so it makes more sense to do just a deep dive on Jason Todd in general. But DC Rebirth, Jason becomes even more layered. He works undercover in Gotham, tries to operate in a gray area, even temporarily works with Batman again. He eventually forms Red Hood and the Outlaws, a new team with Bizarro and Artemis. Jason becomes more emotionally mature, still willing to kill, but no longer defined by hatred. He starts confronting trauma instead of living inside of it and letting it torment him and take him over his emotions and what he does. It's good to remember that Bruce never truly approves of Jason's methods even after all of this, but Jason never fully accepts Bruce's code either. but they do reach something like a mutual acknowledgement, not peace, not really an understanding, but just a mutual, we're brother and father, so we're good, basically. Jason, where he kind of stands now, is a Bat Family member, loosely. He's an anti-hero who sometimes kills. It's not his main thing, and he doesn't do it all the time anymore. He's more independent than any other Robin, emotionally complex, not just angry. He's no longer just the Robin who died. He's the one who survived and chose a different path. Since Under the Red Hood, not saying that Under the Red Hood itself, and then prior to that wasn't so a lot of emotional story arcs and growth for the character, but he has went on a lot of growth since then, and just from or after all of that. So, but that's basically all for Jason Todd. I know he was getting, or maybe just got a new series out. I haven't read any of it, or if it hasn't even came out, it was just I'm probably not gonna read any of it anytime soon. I still got so many stories I gotta read prior. I'm just like 6 or 7 behind on the Ultimate Wonder Woman, or the Absolute Wonder Woman. I read all the Absolute Green Lanterns though; those were really good. But yeah, Jason Todd's always been one of my favorites. He's probably my 3rd favorite Robin. Dick's my 2nd, Tim's my 1st, and fuck Damien. But that was a really fun a whole bunch of different stories to talk about. And then just a fun character kind of breakdown and deep dive to get into. I always loved Jason, and I always loved the Bat Family in general. Batman has kind of lost a bit of hype with me just because the Batman fans always being like, oh, you could beat this guy, you could beat this guy, you could beat this guy, prep time, which is annoying as hell, but I've always loved the Bat Family, I've always loved Jason, and I've wanted to do this episode for a really long time, so I'm really excited and really happy for it and happy about it. If you haven't watched or haven't listened to any of the Civil War episodes, the Identity Crisis, or the Dragon Ball Z episodes that have came out the last couple of weeks, go listen to those and drop a follow. Those are all really entertaining in my not so humble opinion. And if you're into any of those stories, Marvel or DC or Dragon Ball Z, then should enjoy those stories. I do a pretty deep dive on all of those. This Friday we're going to be following up with another manga. I'm not entirely sure what it's going to be. I'm recording this part a bit after I recorded the rest of this episode. I did want to just apologize for this episode coming out a little late. Had some technical difficulties, and then last night with my editing software, and then this morning I also had some more technical difficulties that prevented me from getting it out at a time I would want it to be out by. But as I'm saying this now, it is 2:30 in the afternoon, and it should be up by 4 p.m. today on Monday. And then the manga episode will be out at 8 a.m. on Friday morning. And the times will go back to that afterwards. Sorry about this. I appreciate everybody who's listening and everybody who's been listening. Like I was saying in the beginning of this episode, and I'm going to keep just throwing it out there throughout the things. I don't want to promote it too much, but I do want to keep it on everybody's radar that the YouTube is up. I think episodes 4 through 8 now, and then when this episode's up, this one will be up there too, probably 2 days after today when this comes up on the 23rd. So probably like the 25th, this episode will be up on there, but I think it's 4 through 8 up there for episodes on there now. I'm working on getting the first episode and the 3rd episode up there, but it's a bit more complicated than you would think. But thank you everybody that was listening and everybody who's supporting on social media. Obviously, we're doing pretty good on Instagram. And then my personal social media, I post about it too, and it's doing pretty good on there. So I want to thank everybody for that. And that is all for this day's episode. And I will talk to you guys again on Friday. Thank you very much. Dr. Panel out.